The formalist approach to literature is a way of reading and understanding texts that became popular in the early and mid 20th century, mainly in England and America. Many people referred to it as the new criticism during this time. However, as time passed and new approaches to literature emerged, people started calling it the old new criticism, sometimes even criticizing it. Despite these changes, the formalist method remains important because it teaches us to read closely and carefully. The new critics who supported this approach believed that literature should be understood as an independent work of art with its own internal structure and meaning. They encouraged readers to pay attention to the details of a text, such as its language, form, and structure, instead of focusing on external factors like the author's background or historical context. The new critics emphasized the idea that a literary work is an organic whole. This means that every part of a poem, novel, or a play is connected and contributes to its overall meaning. They believed that understanding a text required careful analysis of how its parts fit together. Just like a piece of music or painting, a literary work has its own unique and must be appreciated on its own terms. For example, when we look at a famous painting or listen to a symphony, we focus on how the colors, shapes, or musical notes work together to create an effect. Similarly, the new critics wanted readers to focus on how words, phrases, and literary devices function in a text to create meaning. Though the new critics were given their name in the 20th century, their ideas were not entirely new. Literary analysis has always existed, and scholars have long studied the structure and form of art. The new critics were influenced by earlier thinkers who also believed that form was crucial in understanding art. They argued that literature, like any other form of art, has some kind of structure. Even when a work appears to lack form, there is still an underlying organization that gives it meaning. For example, a poem may have a strict rhyme scheme or follow a specific pattern, while a novel may use recurring images or symbols to create a sense of unity. The idea of form in literature goes back to ancient times. Plato, the Greek philosopher, used structured dialogues to present his ideas, carefully shaping his arguments through characters and imagery. Aristotle, another Greek thinker, wrote about how literary works should have an orderly arrangement of parts to create a complete and beautiful whole. Horace, a Roman poet, advised writers to keep their works simple and unified. Many classical, medieval, and Renaissance scholars discussed the importance of structure in literature and art. During the Romantic period in the 18th and 19th centuries, the focus on form became even stronger. Writers like Samuel Taylor Coleridge believed that imagination played a key role in shaping literature. Coleridge was influenced by German philosophers like Kant and Hegel, who saw the creative mind as a unifying force. He argued that a good poem must be a complete and harmonious whole where every part supports the overall meaning. Coleridge compared poetry to nature, suggesting that a poem should grow naturally, just like a tree develops from a seed. This idea became popular among Romantic poets who often used images of growth and nature to describe the creative process. John Keats also believed that poetry should emerge naturally, like leaves growing on a tree. Shelley, in his essay A Defense of Poetry, used similar imagery, describing poetry as something that must grow from within rather than being forced or artificially constructed. He argued that great poetry cannot be translated word for word without losing its essence, just as a flower's beauty cannot be preserved if it is crushed or taken apart. These ideas influenced later literary critics, including the new critics who focused on the internal structure of a literary work rather than external influences. In America, Edgar Allan Poe developed his own ideas about form and unity in literature. He believed that short lyric poems and short stories were the best literary forms because they could create a single unified effect. In his essay, The Philosophy of Composition, Poe explained how he carefully structured his famous poem, The Raven, to achieve a specific emotional impact. He criticized poets who did moral lessons in their works, arguing that literature should focus on artistic beauty rather than didactic messages. Henry James, a 19th century novelist and critic, also contributed to the discussion of form in literature. In his essays and prefaces, he argued that fiction should be considered a fine art with each part carefully connected to the whole. He believed that everything in a novel, character, plot, setting, and theme, should be interrelated and contribute to the overall effect. James compared a well crafted novel to a well composed painting where every detail serves a purpose. He believed that good writers pay attention to form, ensuring that nothing in their work is wasted or unnecessary. The new critics built on these earlier ideas, emphasizing the importance of close reading, textual analysis. They believed that the best way to understand a literary work was to examine its structure, language, and literary devices. They rejected the idea that a reader needed to know about the author's life or historical background to appreciate a text. Instead, they argued that everything necessary for understanding a work could be found within the text itself. This approach helped establish literary analysis as a serious academic discipline, providing scholars with a systematic way to study literature. One of the key formalist criticism is the concept of organic form. This means that every part of a literary work is connected and contributes to its overall meaning. A well structured poem, for example, has a balance between its individual lines, imagery, and sound patterns. The words and phrases in the poem interact with each other to create a unified effect. Similarly, a well written novel has carefully developed characters, settings, and themes that work together to shape the story. Formalist critics also focus on literary techniques such as imagery, symbolism, and metaphor. They believe that these elements give a literary work its depth and complexity. By analyzing how these techniques are used, readers can gain a deeper understanding of a text. For example, in Shakespeare's plays, repeated symbols and motifs help reinforce key themes. In poetry, sound patterns such as alliteration and rhyme contribute to the musical quality of a poem and enhance its meaning. Though formalist criticism was very influential in the 20th century, it has faced criticism over time. Some scholars argue that it ignores the social and historical context of literature, focusing too much on the text itself. Others believe that understanding an author's background can provide valuable insights into their work. Despite these criticisms, formalist criticism remains an important approach in literature. It teaches readers to pay close attention to the details of a text and appreciate the craftsmanship involved in creating a literary work.